They said it'd never happen, yet decades later it finally has. Kirby Air Ride is getting its very own sequel, are you fucking kidding me? Oh, and I guess a new Mario Kart came out as well, which means there's a whole new set of cups to race through. Well, at least some new tracks to race through. Wait, how much did this game cost again?
Wait a minute!
Joking aside, there's really only one question that matters. Which of these new cups is the hardest? To figure this out, I decided to race through each of these cups 20 times, during which I recorded and noted down my placement for each race. Doing so meant that I was able to calculate an average placement for each cup, and using this we'll be able to rank each cup from easiest to hardest. To keep things consistent, I needed to use the exact same character/kart combination the whole way through, and while I do tend to use Mario in his standard kart for these videos, Mario Kart World introduced what I consider to be the best character to ever exist: Fish. I just wish it didn't take fucking 5 hours to unlock him. For cosmetic purposes only, I stuck him in the baby blooper as I loaded up the old reliable Mushroom Cup. Now, as is tradition by this point, the Mushroom Cup starts off with Mario Bros Circuit, but don't let its name fool you. It's easily one of the best circuit tracks in the entire franchise. Its layout may not be mind-blowing, but the long winding turns, the new grind rails, as well as the abundance of branching pathways, many of which I sucked at taking. Oh my god. These elements really elevated the quality of the track. Glazing aside, this track isn't very hard. The turns are easy to drift around and the roads are extremely wide, which I'm sure is a change meant to accommodate the fact that there are now 24 races in each race. But when you're an elite driver like you and I, you're not going to be fighting for space while front running. Now here's where things get a bit more interesting. See, in previous games, after selecting next race, you'd get taken to, well, the next race.
Well, duh.
In Mario Kart World, however, Nintendo really wanted us to see the world, as instead of teleporting over to the next track, we've got to drive our way over to it. Yeah. The general idea of an interconnected world map is an interesting one, but I don't think it makes for a very fun experience. Now originally, I was going to go on about which of these connector sections I found the hardest, but then I realized that 90% of the time, we're just driving in a straight fucking line. There's very little to do during these sections and it somehow makes 150cc feel like 50cc. I still don't understand why they even removed 200cc. I think it would fit relatively well with most of the tracks in this game, and it did certainly help make these long ass connector sections less stale. Trust me, after racing through each of these sections 20 times, you just start to wonder whether certain shit works or not. So can you like ride these buses all the way there or what?
Nope.
I think I suck at this game. Either way, we do end up getting one last lap on the next track, which in this case is Crown City. Now Crown City may be part of the Mushroom Cup, but it does up the challenge a little bit. There are more areas to fall off the ledges here, and the turns situated in the higher elevations do take a bit more skill to drift around. That being said, there are still plenty of long straightaways, and there are essentially no obstacles that we have to avoid. Really, the only times I failed to get first place were either because I was too busy creating routes that didn't really exist. Wait, so surely I can grind down here, no? Or, I have no idea what I'm doing. Or I was getting my asshole blasted by the all too common blue shell. With that said, we're on to another connector section that actually starts off pretty well. The roads are narrow, there's plenty of branching paths that implement the new grinding and flip mechanics, and the roads to follow also have their fair share of obstacles in the form of cars. You could say there's some challenge here, but it lasts less than 30 seconds as before long we're back to, well, this. Eventually we end up at Whistle Stop Summit, which is a track that combines the two areas we just passed through. It has its fair share of narrow roads, but it also has a good few branching paths, which you can also grind across. The train obstacles, while fitting, are also extremely slow, meaning it's unlikely you're ever going to get hit by them. What we are guaranteed to get hit by, however, is another long ass driving section towards the next track, which is a real shame considering just how much of a banger this course is. DK Spaceport isn't just an insanely cool callback to where everything began, it's also a surprisingly challenging track to master. It features a lot of chances to try out the new grinding and wall riding mechanics, and paired with the constant barrage of barrel obstacles that are flying towards you, there were a good few moments where I wasn't nearly as slick as I had hoped to be. This was also the first track to really expose the fact that I had no idea what the fuck I was doing when trying to wall ride. Oh shit, look at me go- oh shit, wait. Oh fuck. Overall, a solid finish to a somewhat easy cup. As I'm sure many of you would have guessed, DK Spaceport came out on top as the hardest track in the entire Mushroom Cup with an average placement of 1.24. Overall, I'd consider this cup relatively easy as I averaged a total point score of 58.1 after my 20 races. But with nothing to compare this to, I think it's time we head over to the next cup, the Flower Cup. Now this cup starts off with desert hills, and as its name suggests, this track takes place in a desert, meaning the roads, if you can even call them that, are extremely wide and open-ended. With every lap, an extra statue guy comes jogging down the pathway, which is kind of cute, but if we're being honest, these guys aren't exactly hard to avoid. What I will say is that it was around this point where I clocked just how much better the CPU AI was in this game. They'll take any shortcut or wall ride across the galaxy if it means passing you at the last minute. Even so, Desert Hills is a relatively straightforward track, which is also something that can be said for the connector section to follow. The drive from Desert Hills to Shy Guy Bazaar pretty much confirms that these segments were only put in to flex the open-ended world that they crafted. Don't get me wrong, seeing that massive sand dragon launch itself across my screen for the first time was orgasmic. But on each subsequent run, I couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed that he wasn't an obstacle that burst out later as you flew across the desert. Instead, you just kind of get to watch him having fun, while you're most definitely not having fun.
Well, this sucks.
Thankfully, Shy Guy Bazaar is a joy to drive through. While its layout is still relatively straightforward, it's a lot more compact and enclosed, making for a more chaotic experience overall. For me personally, this meant that I'd crash into things or just fly off the edge while trying out new tricks. Its sharp turns and obstacles make it a more challenging track than Desert Hills, but I still wouldn't consider it a hard track overall, which again is something that could be said for this next track. Now if you hadn't already noticed, every track in this cup has been a retro track from a previous game. Not saying that's a bad thing, I honestly think they did a marvelous job when it came to remaking these tracks, and Warrior Stadium is no different in that regard. Despite it featuring an even simpler layout, the addition of wall riding and grind rails makes this track an absolute blast to play through. Unfortunately though, the hardest part of this track is how to even get up onto said railings at certain parts. Outside of that though, the only thing providing any challenge on this track are once again the fucking blue shells. Oh, just piss off, man. In a cup full of retro tracks, it's only fitting that the one with the best glob is saved till last. And as much as I clown on these connector segments, if they lead to track reveals like this, wait, holy shit. Wait, it looks so fucking good. Then who am I to complain? Airship Fortress not only gives your girlfriend a run for their money in terms of the looks department, but it also happens to be the toughest track in the entire cup. It's got the tightest turns, the most enclosed spaces, all of which are accompanied by some of the most annoying obstacles in the entire game. You could avoid these obstacles by riding the railings around the track, but I've only ever lost placements doing this. Despite the added movement capabilities, the more compact feel of this track means that no matter how sick you think you are, you're going to get railed by some items. Yeah, nice try. I'm too fucking good. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, Airship Fortress took the spot as the most difficult track in the entire Flower Cup with an average placement of 1.24. What was surprising, however, was the fact that my average point total was higher here than in the Mushroom Cup, meaning that, at least in my case, I found the Mushroom Cup to be harder than the Flower Cup. That said, it's time we moved on to the Star Cup, which starts off with yet another retro track. DK Pass retains a lot of the elements from its DS counterpart. It's got these same sharp yet curling turns towards the start, as well as the large snowballs that slowly roll down the hills. The track is decently challenging, but what caused me the most stress was trying to nail the shortcut every lap. The CPUs didn't seem to struggle with it, yet here I was failing over and over again. I'm not putting this in the fucking video, no way. It was truly a humbling experience. One last thing that I'd like to mention at this point is the rubber banding in this game. It's like premium edition or something. I can never seem to build a big lead, meaning any last minute blue shells instantly result in someone passing my ass. Wait, they're so close to me that they got hit by the explosion of the blue shell. What? The tracks might not be that bad, but the actual game feels more competitive in that sense. Rambling aside, the journey to Starview Peak is anything but peak, and while the track itself is visually appealing, it lacks any semblance of challenge. The roads are so wide that you could fit the entire roster across them at once, and while there are sections without any railings, you'd need to purposely drive yourself off them to ever see what's beneath the track. That being said, my average placements on this track are abysmal. Now you're probably wondering how that's even possible. Well, I think it's best that I just show you. Bro, I swear to fucking God, dude, what? Oh, but Dude, it's always this track! What is going on? Next up was Sky High Sunday. There's no way anyone wanted this fucking track in this game. Although its inclusion isn't that surprising. I mean, it was one of the only tracks to include interactive railings back in 8 Deluxe and Tour. I mean, the track has always been pretty shit, but I'd say it's even easier this time around. See, one of the biggest struggles in 8 Deluxe was the camera angle not panning to see where you were landing after this massive jump, but it seems World has fixed that issue, making driving around this B-Tech baby park far easier. This leaves us with one last track in this cup, and it's one of my long-time favorites. Wario's Shipyard, or Wario's Galleon as my game likes to call it, sees us driving across the 7 seas. Driving on top of the water is a new experience, and the fact that you can trick over the waves makes it feel a lot more rapid at times. That being said, I think this track, like Sky High Sunday, is a bit easier this time around. There aren't any of the usual obstacles from Mario Kart 7 like the crabs or swinging obstacles, and instead there's a lot more free space to drift around in. It does look incredible, but I still don't know if I'd consider it an improvement. Regardless, at the end of the Star Cup, I'd averaged a total of 57.95 points, making it the toughest cup so far. As I stated before, I performed the worst on Starview Peak, as for whatever reason, that track automatically shits out a blue shell as you're nearing the finish line every single time. The Shell Cup starts off with an absolute classic in Cooper Beach, and despite it being a rather simple track, it's definitely turned up the charm. I mean, it's been turned into a whole ass beach rave for God's sake, which honestly is fitting considering how fucking hectic this track actually is. I heard someone describe this track as a circle with a massive rock in the middle of it, and while I can't deny that's true, the fact that there are now 24 races means you're constantly getting railed by fucking items left and right. With 5 whole laps to get fucked on, you'd be surprised at how many times you're praying for the right items just to win at the last minute. Having partied to our heart's content at Cooper Beach, it's time to make the long trek over to a faraway oasis. Get it?
Boo, you suck!
Oh boy. The drive might be a long one, but at least it's fairly scenic. Just make sure you stick to the laid roads, otherwise you'll be in a world of pain. Oh my god, the one time I try and go off-road. Oh great. The actual track is fairly easy. There's a good bit of variety in terms of terrain here, but unlike ice or something, none of it makes the track any harder to drive across. After our visit to the safari, where better to drive than Crown City, where, wait, haven't we already driven to Crown City? Whether or not this is the same city, we are apparently driving through it during peak hour traffic, as this time around there's countless cars and bombs that just kind of line the lanes. It's got by far the most obstacles of any track so far, which does make things slightly more challenging to navigate around. The congested streets then turn into a little back alley road, which has fairly sharp corners and narrower pathways. Overall, I'd say this is one of the more challenging tracks in this cup, which isn't really saying much, especially when considering this next track, Peach Stadium. For a track with such a grandiose name, it certainly sucks ass. It's just another oval type track where you drift around the widest turns to ever exist. I get that we're in the presence of royalty, but we might as well be driving Boeing 747s with all the space. This is probably the easiest track in the entire game, and I can only say this because it was the very first track where I came first every single time. Koopa Troopa Beach on the other hand surprised me, coming out as the toughest course in the entire cup. The cup as a whole proved to be fairly easy though, with me averaging 58.43 points. We've arrived at what I consider to be my favourite cup. Now, wait, do you hear that? Now I can't believe I'm saying this, but my jaw would well and truly be broken before I ever finish sucking off this game's OST.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, why'd they have to go so hard for an introductory tune that's literally 20 seconds long? I mean, doesn't listening to this just want to make you take a beachside drive with the wind blowing through your hair while you're listening? No. Well, too bad, because we're off to Peach Beach. Now technically this is another retro track, but referring to it as such would be pretty disrespectful. This track has had a full makeover, with the last 2 laps being completely original. The fact that each lap is completely separate from the last does add a needed bit of spice to a rather simple track. While the second lap has a few tricky segments to do with the wall riding and grinding, I wouldn't necessarily call it hard. The same thing could be said for the next track, Salty Salty Speedway. It's definitely a trickier track than Peach Beach with its sharper turn angles, but the fact that the majority of the track takes place on canals as wide as the Pacific Ocean means most of the time you'll cruise to an easy win. The drive to follow is one of the more exotic yet perilous ones. In the span of about a minute, we go from dodging cars on the motorway to fighting for our lives as we dash across a waterfall, which, now that I'm looking at it, isn't nearly as dangerous as I'd first thought. Such a precarious drive could only lead us to one place, Dino Jungle. This track is another old time favourite of mine, and I've got to say, It's another one that's become significantly easier. Sure, it's still got the same narrow roads and the sharp zigzagging turns towards the start, but it also lost the massive void of darkness, meaning there's less areas in which you can be punished for screwing up a shortcut. Not to mention, the water geysers aren't even real obstacles anymore, they just lift you up and you can now reach higher areas. Not to worry though, as this cup finishes with not only one of the toughest tracks so far, but also one of the best. Holy fuck, what a marvelous track this one is. Great Peak Ruins really has it all. Tough turns that actually required me to brake drift for once, exciting branching pathways that I fucked up more than once while trying to learn the track.
Help me!
And a special ambiance paired with a charming soundtrack. I mean, why the fuck do I only get to race one lap of this shit? Like, come on, man. Come on. Definitely the hardest track in this cup, and one of my new all-time favorites for sure. Well, I kind of spoiled it already when I was glazing the hell out of it, but Great Peak Ruins takes the spot as the hardest track in the Banana Cup. In fact, it was purely because of this track that the Banana Cup ended up being middle of the pack in terms of difficulty so far, as I averaged 58.3 points on each run. By this point, I had completed over 400 races, and while that might not sound like a huge amount, it had certainly taken its toll on me mentally. Completing the races was one thing, but where I really started to struggle was having to manage, record, and analyze every single race. If only there were an app that could make these tasks effortless. Oh, I guess luck's on my side this time. Odoo is your one-stop shop for anything project related. You thought Warriors Shipyard and Airship Fortress were sexy. Just wait until you see Odoo Project's Kanban View, a stellar dashboard designed to highlight and monitor the progress of all your tasks at once. Better yet, these tasks can be updated in real time simply by dragging and dropping them. The mind-blowing tech doesn't just stop there though. One simple drift around the corner opens up the Gantt view, where you're able to manage task deadlines with ease. Finally, you can group these tasks into batches, allowing for efficient and quick actions to be made. Alongside this, you can set milestones, track costs and revenue, create subtasks, and even organize activities like meetings, calls, and to-do lists with other team members. I didn't realize it was possible to be a jack of all trades, as well as a master of all, yet Odoo seems to have proven me wrong once again. Not only that, but Odoo gives Mario Kart World's roster a good run for its money. Every app here is fully integrated with one another, leading to a seamless transfer of information and less overall stress for you. Well, what are you waiting for? You wouldn't want to finish in 24th place again, would you? Go to the link in the description below to try out Odoo Project for yourself. Thanks again to Odoo for sponsoring this video. With that said, we've got another banging cup to get back to in the Leaf Cup. This one, however, starts off with a rather confusing track. Cheep Cheep Force was probably the toughest track to wrap my head around at first, because there's so much going on at once. It starts off alright with some drifted turns, but quickly devolves into this rapids area where you can barely see what the fuck's going on around you. The section being so compact oftentimes leads to unwanted railing, which is unfortunate considering how close it is to the finish line. It was also during this track where I got the biggest humbling ever by a CPU in Mario Kart. Yoshi, you're getting fucked as well. What? Nah. Now I know I haven't really been talking about the connector sections between each track, but when most of them look like this, what is there to really say? Most of the obstacles may as well be cosmetic, and the turns give you planet-sized roads to drift around them. Dandelion Depths doesn't fare much better in this regard. It's got a few roundabout turns which open up into an underground water section. But while I am a fan of the water driving in this game, I can't say they're all that challenging, as they're extremely open-ended while also having few to no obstacles present at all. Definitely one of the easier tracks in this cup for sure. Now, if we're being honest, ghost-based tracks in the past haven't been that great. Twisted Mansion took them up a peg, but for the most part, the Haunted theme is usually reserved for the smaller, more forgettable tracks in this series. But not this time. Ironically enough, we actually drive through some of these older tracks before arriving at Boo Cinema. Now, as a concept, Boo Cinema is already pretty sweet, but diving past the screen into the film reel itself, all while putting on a show for all the boos sitting out in the audience, had me grinning from ear to ear. Unfortunately, I can't say the track is difficult in any way. The turns are rather straightforward, and to my knowledge, there's not a single obstacle throughout the entire track. Don't believe me? Go look for yourself. I couldn't find a single obstacle. Well, unless you count the fucking blue shells, which are just rampant in this fucking game.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Now, as is customary it feels like in this game, the cup ends off with its toughest track in Dry Bones Burnout. Although being called the toughest track in this lineup doesn't really mean that much. Even so, the added verticality of this track as well as the smaller roads makes for a challenging experience, especially when you've got to deal with all the items being thrown at you at once. One thing I did notice was the decreased lethality of lava. See, in previous games, falling into the lava would instantly incinerate you. In World, however, there's a small window where you can actually drive back out of it. Just make sure you take that window.
Wait, I'm still alive. Wait, what?
To no one's surprise, Dry Bones Burnout proved to be the hardest track in the Leaf Cup. This difficulty carried on over to the cup itself, as I only managed an average point total of 58.05, making it one of the more challenging cups to race through in this game. It's definitely not the hardest though, and there's a very good reason for that.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Now, I know what you're thinking. Moo Moo Meadows, that's gotta be one of the easiest tracks to ever exist. And look, I agree with you. The biggest change in regards to this track doesn't even have anything to do with the track itself. But hey, if you ever wanted to play as one of these slow ass cows, then, I mean, you can now. Choco Mountain, on the other hand, did get quite the big change up. The first half of the track mimics the old 64 track, but with a few slight changes like these charging Koopas. There's also no railing to stop us from dropping to the floor below here, and while the rockfall seems to be slower and less frequent, if you were less skilled than say myself, there's a good chance you'd clot into them. For those of you that are actually good, please, for the love of God, please tell me, how the fuck do you avoid these constant blue shells? I'm fucking begging, please, someone just make them stop. Apart from that though, it's a pretty easy track. Back and forth we go between these retro tracks in this cup, and this time around we're at Toad's Factory. Now Toad's Factory, like Moo Moo Meadows, hasn't been tampered with too much. Like they say, if it ain't broke, why fix it? There are a few neat grinding opportunities inside the factory and towards the end, but none of these add to the challenge of the track, which essentially doesn't exist in the first place. The drive to Toad's Factory, on the other hand, well, let's not get into that, shall we? The Lightning Cup finishes off with the only series of tracks that could ever hold a candle to Rainbow Road, and boy, does it not disappoint. There's so much going on in this iteration of Bowser's Castle. There's narrow roads, there's windy turns, a whole ass thundercloud section, and plenty of meteorites to avoid as we burst through this banging track. I'm not sure if it's the flames coming off our wheels in this track, but you just feel like you're driving so much faster than the majority of the tracks we've raced through so far. Now I don't think it'd surprise anyone to learn that Bowser's Castle was the hardest track in the Lightning Cup, followed closely by Choco Mountain if you can believe it. Overall, the Lightning Cup proved to be one of the toughest cups yet, as I only managed a measly 57.14 points across the 20 races. And this leaves us with one final cup, which is quite fitting as it's often touted as the hardest cup in most Mario Kart games. The Special Cup starts off with Acorn Heights this time around, which is a pretty decent start all things considered. There's multiple branching pathways to take as well as countless stems to grind your way across, making for a surprisingly fun track. Now I was under the illusion that there were areas in which you could fall off this track, but after racing through it a few times, you really shouldn't be struggling with that. Now, Nintendo decided to follow up Acorn Heights with Mario Circuit, which is an interesting choice to say the least. Funnily enough, this is one of the few tracks where we actually get to experience 3 laps. But I mean, that's a given considering one lap of the original track would be done in 20 seconds. What is neat though is that they managed to combine the first 3 Mario Circuit tracks into one, and while it does have the usual tight turns, I'd still consider it the easiest track in the cup. Despite saying that though, Peach Stadium does give it a good run for its money. Now all things considered, Peach Stadium is a bit of a disappointing penultimate track. It's definitely an upgrade over the version stuck in the Shell Cup, but outside of a few windy roads, there's really not much going on here. There are a few obstacles in the form of these pipes, but really this track just comes off as a slightly stylized circuit track. If this track helps prove anything though, it's that the blue shell will always be there to fuck you. With that said, we're left with one final track, and boy oh boy, I can only imagine how epic this journey is going to be. But it's a straight fucking line. What the fuck? As disappointing and as clusterfucky as this connector path is, the actual track is a sight to behold. They really went all out on this Rainbow Road. It is absolutely breathtaking to look at, which is a good thing considering it takes about an hour to finish. This track has 5 whole ass laps with each one paying homage to an old Rainbow Road in some way. As you'd expect, certain roads are fairly narrow with hardly any railings to stop you falling off. There's also plenty of areas that have winding turns that you need to carefully drift around. That being said, I definitely wouldn't call it one of the hardest Rainbow Roads out of the whole series. A lot of the lines are fairly simple to drift around and most of the roads are so wide that it's hard to find yourself in a situation where you're actually drifting off the track. The only problem, dare I say, is its length, as you're more likely to get hit by 8 blue shells instead of the usual 3. Now, would you believe me if I told you that Rainbow Road wasn't the hardest track in this cup? I'd be lying of course, but it's good to know that I've got some trust built up with you guys. Rainbow Road being the hardest may not be that surprising, but what was surprising, at least to me, was the fact that I averaged a total of 58.29 points across my 20 races, meaning it's not the hardest cup this time around. With that being said, I think it's time we ranked each cup from easiest to hardest, starting off with the Shell Cup. All the tracks featured in this cup either had massive straightaways or extremely wide roads with simple turn angles. This was then followed up closely by the Flower and Banana Cup. In a shock twist I'm sure, the Special Cup takes the next spot, followed by the Mushroom Cup. Now before this video, if you told me the Special Cup would lose to the Mushroom Cup in terms of difficulty, I'd take a gun to your nuts and threaten you until you took it back. But hey, this game's all about breaking boundaries. That's why it costs $80, am I right? Anyway, third place goes to the Leaf Cup, which is a nice mix of extremely easy and somewhat challenging tracks. The runner-up this time around is the Star Cup, meaning the hardest cup in Mario Kart World, at least for me, is the Lightning Cup. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed that I tracked the number of blue shells that hit me last minute for each cup. And awkwardly enough, the Lightning Cup also had the highest number of occurrences in this regard. And, I mean, take from that what you will. Either way, I need to go rub some cooling cream on my ass, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like and subscribe, and if you hated it, well, I hope the blue shells rail you next.